Wes Huff sits down with Joe Rogan to discuss the evidence of the resurrection of Jesus.
Well, Paul says that 400 people saw him all at once.
400 people saw the crucifixion.
No, saw the resurrected Jesus. Yeah, 1 Corinthians 15, Paul says that Jesus appeared to the disciples, and then he appeared to 400 people all at once.
Wesley Huff is a historian and a biblical scholar who studies linguistics and ancient manuscripts. And we're going to discuss the importance of Jesus being crucified for our sins and being resurrected 3 days later. But hey, like, subscribe, hit the bell notification so you don't miss out on any videos. Let's dive into it.
Because of this claim that they say they saw Jesus resurrected. This is a miracle, right? Dead people don't usually rise from the dead.
So what is your personal belief when it comes to the resurrection? What do you think do you have a belief, or do you just try to interpret the text and try to see what is the message?
As a historian, I do think it is a historical question. You have a guy who objectively lived, he objectively died, and then individuals close to his inner circle claim that they see him not dead.
Right.
Again.
This is a highly unusual activity.
Highly unusual.
Right. So, but it's hard when you're dealing with illiterate populations, you're dealing with thousands of years of time, you're dealing with an oral tradition, and then you have us sitting here talking about it in 2024, trying to figure it at the end of 2024, trying to figure this out.
Now, some of the common beliefs of people who don't believe in the resurrection say that the disciples stole his body and made up this whole lie. But what would be the point of that? Because evidently, the disciples were killed because of the claims that they made that Jesus was God.
Are going to steal his body.
Okay, I'm tracking with you. What's next?
And then we're going to tell the whole world that he rose from the dead.
Oh, you know I'm in.
I love it already.
All right, classic. Then what?
And then we're all going to get brutally murdered.
You think if they were facing death, they would come out clean and say, no, we made all this up. But no, they died for this. Peter, one of the disciples, wanted to be crucified upside down because he believed that it wasn't worthy enough to be crucified the way his Lord was. Other disciples were dragged to their death behind horse and carriage, boiled in a pot of oil, beheaded, and more. And back in those times, historically, women were looked down upon. So to have them be the first ones to uncover that Jesus was not in the tomb is more interesting evidence on why it was documented. And even more, 400 plus eyewitnesses of Jesus walking the earth in physical form after he'd been crucified on the cross. He even shows one of his disciples, doubting Thomas, the holes in his hands so he would believe him.
It's very difficult for anybody who thinks of themselves as an intelligent person who's secular to even entertain the possibility that someone died and come back to life.
And I get that. But we've already talked about the fact that we don't think that the only thing that exists is matter and motion. We as in you and I, right? Like, we believe that there's something else going on in this world that's a little bit crazy.
There's something else.
And that to, I think, exclude that, I think excludes something that you're kind of putting blinders on. But the Gospels are written in the lifetime of the eyewitnesses. And they're written in this period of time where you have groups of individuals who could have fact-checked those things. So
how do you fact-check someone coming back from the dead?
Well,
how many people saw his body, right?
Well, Paul says that 400 people saw him all at once.
400 people saw the crucifixion?
No, saw the resurrected Jesus. Yeah, 1 Corinthians 15, Paul says that Jesus appeared to the disciples, and then he appeared to 400 people all at once. The Gospel of Luke and Acts, so same author wrote these both documents. He says that Jesus was walking around teaching them for 40 days after he was resurrected from the dead. And so these are written within a time period when you have people who would have seen Jesus' ministry, who were there, say at something like the feeding of the 5,000, who could have been able to verify, debunk some of these things that are being said. And you go from a bunch of scared guys who, because Jesus wasn't the only messianic figure who arose and claimed to be the Messiah.
Right.
There were a number of individuals both prior to and after Jesus, but they die and the movement dies with them.
Do you think it's possible that he didn't die? And do you think it's possible that they thought he was dead? because that does happen. There was actually a case very recently where a guy was about to be harvested for organs. They thought he was dead. This guy started moving again and came back to life. It's a very, very bizarre case because his family had been told that he was going to be harvested for organs. They were preparing for that.
Yeah, I mean, we know a lot about Roman crucifixion. And we know
brutal.
that, and we know that they did their job well. Atheist, agnostic, Christian scholars, they will say if we can know anything about Jesus, like they'll cast a doubt on a lot of the things that we read about in the Gospels in terms of the actual historical Jesus of Nazareth. They'll say one thing we can be sure of is that he died by crucifixion under Pontius Pilate, because we have not just multiple attested documents that we refer to as the New Testament. Roman and Greek and Jewish writers refer to that claim afterwards. Chances of Jesus surviving the crucifixion, I think, are narrow to none. And the chance of him appearing 3 days later completely fine, I mean, if the first thing you do, if you survive a crucifixion and then you go and you find your disciples, the first thing you say is not, peace be with you. It's get me to a hospital.
Are we entirely certain of their measurement of days?
With Jews, any part of a day was considered a day. So 3 days and 3 nights becomes almost an idiom for any part of that day is the day. It's very possible that it wasn't like how we would think of 3 24-hour days, especially if he dies on Friday and wakes up on Sunday.
So that would actually make it less time than more time.
Yeah.
So it's not like he had recovery time.
Oh, no, he didn't have recovery
That's
time.
what I'm saying. That's what I'm getting. It's not like it was 3 days, it was actually 3 months.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So,
no.
So the 400 people saw him afterwards.
That's the claim that Paul makes.
Paul makes this.
Yeah.
How many different people have some sort of a recollection or a writing or something that's attributed to them of being witness to his resurrection?
We have Peter, Paul, Jude, James, or Matthew and John are attributed to direct disciples of Jesus. Luke and Mark are not. So they are not eyewitnesses within the Jesus community. In fact, Luke prefaces his gospel by saying that. He's right up front about this. He's like, hey, I'm not an eyewitness. Don't confuse me with an eyewitness. So you have a guy named Quintilian who is basically, I mentioned him before with the, he's teaching people how to write. And he says that if you're going to write biography, you need to be interviewing eyewitnesses and you can't be too far away from the event to be able to write these things. And Quintilian, Lucian, and Josephus, who are all these very prominent ancient biographers and writers of history, have a lot of crossover in the way they describe how you should write history with the words that Luke uses at the beginning of his gospel, where he says, I'm interviewing eyewitnesses and I'm writing up an orderly account.
So we have an account of the resurrection. Do we have an account of the denial of the resurrection? Is there an historical record of him just dying and this, like a refutal or a rebuttal rather to what they're saying?
No, the only ones from the ancient world that deny his resurrection are groups that come on afterwards that sometimes are described as Gnostics, and they're not necessarily just denying it for the reasons we might think they were. They're denying it because they have incorporated ideas of pagan philosophy where they believe that the spiritual is good and the physical is bad. Let me back up. If Jesus is God, he cannot have a physical body. So they deny that he actually had a physicality to him. This is sometimes called Docetism because dokein in Greek means to seem. So these groups that we describe as the docetics, they are denying that Jesus had a physical body. He only seemed to have a physical body. We don't actually get like a concrete denial of his resurrection in that way until you get things like the Gospel of Barnabas in the Middle Ages.
Now, the book of Barnabas is one that says Jesus wasn't crucified, but this is a known forgery, which Wes Huff and Billy Carson discussed in their debate. And it's a known forgery because it's not written anywhere close to any eyewitnesses. It's written almost 1,000 years later in Italian and Spanish. Just because a book has the name of a biblical character does not mean it's scripture. Also, the same goes for the Gospel of Jesus' wife, claiming that Jesus had a wife while he was on his ministry. These are known forgeries and are heretical.
It's actually the document that Billy brought up to me in the conversation we had, is the evidence that Jesus was never crucified, the Gospel of Barnabas. Well, Gospel of Barnabas is 15th century. It paraphrases Dante's Inferno. It's not an ancient document. So, but in the ancient world, nobody really had that big of a problem with these kind of supernatural claims. The more of the kind of skepticism was why you would worship a crucified individual to begin with.
Wow. So they were less surprised that he was resurrected because it's so humiliating to be crucified.
Yeah. A God would let himself go through this?
Right.
Like, what are you talking about?
The resurrection is an essential part of the belief of Christianity. The Old Testament law was in place and God came to fulfill the law and bring a new covenant through a relationship with Jesus. You now have direct access to God. Jesus had to fulfill the prophecies of the Old Testament to be claimed the Messiah. And he does so, and he even prophesies and speaks of the crucifixion and the resurrection. Check out these verses here. Matthew 12, verse 40. For just as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the great fish, so will the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. Matthew 17, verse 9. And as they were coming down the mountain, Jesus commanded them, tell no one the vision until the Son of Man is raised from the dead. Matthew 20, verse 18. See, we are going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be delivered over to the chief priests and scribes, and they will condemn him to death and deliver him over to the Gentiles to be mocked and flogged and crucified. He will be raised on the 3rd day. And here's one of many Old Testament prophecies of Jesus. Isaiah 53, verse 5, but he was pierced for our transgressions, he was crushed for our iniquities. Upon him was the chastisement that brought us peace, and with his wounds we are healed. So Jesus had to come fulfill the law and the prophecies to be called the Messiah. Hey, I hope you enjoyed this video and this discussion. Hey, make sure you like, subscribe, hit the bell notification so you don't miss out on any videos. Catch you on the next one.